Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Let's talk money.
And welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Financial independence sounds real great, but it also sounds like something that's far off, or for most people, probably not something that's really going to happen. Can we really reach financial independence? Well, tonight we have Sean Cooper, freelance writer. You can find him at SeanCooperWriter.com. Welcome to our show, Sean.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. And I think we all know the members of the Money Mastermind Show. We have Kyle Prevost of YoungandThrifty.ca, Miranda Marquit of Planting Money Seeds, Peter Anderson of Bible Money Matters, Tom Drake of the Canadian Finance Blog, and I'm Glenn Craig of Free From Broke. So, Sean, tell us a little bit about financial independence. What does that actually mean? Is that like Thurston Howell III living in lavish luxury on some deserted island, or what is that?
Well, there seems to be all sorts of definitions of financial independence. I mean, you can look up the definition on Wikipedia, but to me, financial independence is about basically being able to live off of the assets that you own without having to work a day job. So in my situation, with my house and the rental income that I get, it covers all the expenses and I end up getting a profit. So I wouldn't even have to work if I wanted to. So it's basically from earning income from rental property, that, you know, I have the choice of retiring if I want to. I mean, of course, I don't want to do that because I'm only 30, but it just gives you more opportunities, in my opinion.
What do you mean by retiring? Like, what would that mean, that you just didn't have to worry about trying to make money anymore?
Yes, I mean, you know, I'm still young and there's other goals that I want to achieve in life, but basically, I mean, you know, I wouldn't have to go out in the workforce if I didn't want to. So that's basically what financial independence means to me. You know, rental income, or whether you're living off your investments or whatnot, if you can, you know, if that covers all your daily living expenses, then that's what financial independence is, in my opinion.
Sounds like a pretty good definition there. How did you get into property owning, if that's what I understand it correctly, then, and rental income? Because that in itself sounds maybe a little scary or far off for a lot of people.
Yes, well, I was inspired by Scott McGillivray from the show Income Property on HGTV. I heard a story about how when he was in at the University of Waterloo, he actually used some of his OSAP money, his student loan money, towards a down payment of his very first income property, and from there, you know, he owns hundreds of income properties. I mean, it's not my dream to own 100 income properties or anything like that, but I think with how crazy the prices are in big cities like Toronto and Vancouver, with the average detached home being over $1 million, that, you know, for one single person to own a house is, you know, kind of unrealistic unless you have some sort of secondary income source. So I think, you know, in a city like Toronto, having some sort of rental income or roommates is kind of a no-brainer unless you want to have a mortgage for the next 25 years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just outside of New York City, and it's really hard on one income. You know, we live in an area where it's easy to be six-figure poor, if that makes sense. But you know, also owning that first home is also such a far-off thing for many people. How do you get enough money, you know, outside of using maybe student loans like you had talked about somebody using before? How do you do that? How do you get that first nut, so to speak, saved up?
Well, how I did it was I actually started saving my down payment while I was still in university. So I was working 3 part-time jobs while I was in university, as well as during the summertime. I would work full-time. So basically, with the money that I earned during the summertime, I was able to pay for the entire year's tuition, and then any of the extra money I was putting away towards a down payment. Now, after I graduated, I saved for 3 years towards the down payment of my house, and I basically continued to live like a student and live frugally even after graduating. So by living frugally and doing extra work like writing freelance personal finance articles, I was able to put away a lot of money and probably save about 80% of my paycheck and basically build a big down payment, because without that, there's no way I would have been a homeowner in a city like Toronto.
I've read several posts talking about your story. It's pretty compelling. And one thing you've talked about in several of those is the importance of diversifying your income and having more than one income source.
Yes.
And do you think that's really important part of what you've done in order to achieve your independence?
Definitely, because some people think that it's risky to work freelance, but I think depending on one source of income, a full-time job is actually risky, because if you lose your full-time job, that's 100% of your income gone. So I basically have multiple streams of income, like my full-time job, as well as I used to work part-time at a supermarket. I also have rental income as well as my freelance income, and it came from multiple clients. So I definitely diversify my income, and I think that's a good strategy rather than just depending on one source of income.
Amen. Yay. Well, just as the other freelancer out here, that's what I do full time, is freelance, and so it's nice. And one of the things that struck me, since I'm a renter, I don't actually I owned a home once and I didn't like it, and so I actually like to rent. But one of the things that struck me is when he went back and was talking about if he wanted to quit his job or if he wanted to live in this way. And to me, it's not so much about, hey, I want to be able to live off my assets forever, but it's about freedom and flexibility. And so even though I'm not have rental income or anything, I have a nice career where I make enough money where I have a very flexible lifestyle. And so to me, that's kind of more important than whether or not I have a huge nest egg or whether or not I have property. And I think it goes back to options and whether you've built up that flexibility. And I really like what Sean was talking about when he's talking about, figuring out how he wanted to live, what he wanted to do, and what his goals were, and then just going for it. And I think that's very important, even if, my goals don't mesh with Sean's goals. I really like the way he approached it.
Sean, I'm wondering, because as a guy that likes to stir the pot and sometimes steps on people's toes, you, my friend, have a particular talent for stirring up the haters, as I call them. It's amazing. Don't ever read internet comments. They're terrible things, but I do. Everyone warns me not to. And on Sean Cooper's articles, there's people like me who are like, oh my God, this is an awesome story. This guy sacrificed some of these luxuries and did cool stuff. And then they're outweighed by these insane people who feel the need to tell you how to run your life. So what do you do to inspire it? And what about your sacrifices seems to really trip people up?
As I've said many times, my story is very polarizing. Some people either think, wow, he did a great thing, or there's other people who think, boy, he's crazy. I would never do something like that. So I guess it all comes down to people are kind of accustomed to the lifestyle that they have already, and they just aren't willing to make the financial sacrifices. But as I mentioned, it's probably not realistic for most people to pay off their mortgage in 3 years, but if you can draw some sort of inspiration from my story and learn some lessons and perhaps pay off your mortgage in 20 or 15 years, I think that's great. So rather than concentrate on the haters, I would like people to take a positive message and set some sort of financial goals for themselves, rather than try to insult my accomplishments. So I wish that people would kind of take a positive outlook on it, but there's always those people out there that hide behind computers and make anonymous comments, but I'm not really paying attention to those people. I kind of just ignored those comments.
Well, I think you're crazy. I think you're crazy, but but I think you did a good thing, because you figured out what you wanted, and that's what you did. You figured out what was important to you with your money, and that's what you did. I would never sacrifice as much as you did. Everybody knows here that I'm very hedonistic, so I would. Well, I would not be sacrificing, but I love that you did that.
You paid off
for sure.
$255,000 of mortgage debt within 3 years. Is that what it was?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
figured out what you wanted to do, and you made a plan, and you did it, and that's what you need to do with whatever you're doing with your money.
It's a
And
pretty
I
hefty
remember reading
mortgage
one of these
too.
articles about the sacrifices that you were making. I mean, one of them was, you're doing a full-time job, and you have your part-time job working at the supermarket. As a vegetarian, you were working in the meat department. Is that?
Yes, that's correct. That shows how determined I was.
It's like the opposite of Rocky.
I don't know.
Rocky's in the meat department hitting sides of beef. Sean's like selling them and then eating vegetables. It's awesome.
I don't know. I was going to ask if you had any moral quandaries about having to work in the meat department.
Well, I mean, it wasn't the most glamorous job. I was fine with it, except when I saw rabbit meat. It kind of made me sick to my stomach. But besides that, it was absolutely peachy.
But
So
you know,
really, what that comes down to, you're going to make a huge goal like this. You're going to have to make sacrifices along the way,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
what's interesting is, I mean, if there's people out there that's saying what you're doing is crazy, like to me that doesn't sound too crazy. Like, I mean, what you did was just very determined, and you just worked very hard for it. And you sacrifice maybe some luxuries right now. Like crazy is like, I decide to live in a desert somewhere for a tour, whatever. I don't know. Some like a crazy story. Like what you did, you just worked hard for it. But maybe that says something about what our society's at right now, where just working hard for a particular goal sounds like something that's completely insane.
I was going to say, Glenn, that's because you're not belonging to the current 20-year-old generation. That's why it doesn't sound crazy to you, because I can tell you, again, as someone who has sort of followed Sean's story, I think, for quite a while now, I think of the vast majority of people are younger people, and they're looking at this going, oh, my goodness, like, I can't even cut out my latte, never mind all the things Sean Cooper is doing. Like, he bought this beautiful home and then rented out the top part of it, which obviously is a huge part of it. I don't want to steal Sean's thunder here, but that's one small thing he did. And people are like, oh, my God, I'd be enjoying the top of that house. I'd be putting it on TV, looking in. Instead, Sean did the smart thing, banked the money, and people hate him for it. It's crazy. I don't know. Sean's way more level-headed about this than I am. I just find the whole thing just mind-boggling to me.
Sean,
People
might go, I was just going to say, Sean might go a bit to the extreme with it, but at the same time, you get these comments that, you wasted the best years of your life.
Exactly.
But honestly, I feel like I've wasted the best years of my life by not kind of working the way that Sean did it earlier on, kind of thing. Like during my 20s, I didn't really try that hard. Thankfully, I got into a good real estate market, but it's not from hard work.
Well, I mean, I met a young lady today who actually started bought a pre-construction condo at age 20, and she's going to be moving into it at age 24. So that makes me sound not very ambitious. I bought my house at 27.
Now, I mean, what you did, you bought a home, and that sounds like a good portion of where you're getting your assets to live off of. Is that reasonable for most people? Like, what about your story can really translate to everybody else?
Well, I would say the main lesson from my story, it's all about goal setting, whether you want to own a house or you want to save towards a down payment or you want to save towards retirement. It's about setting a goal and then taking the steps that you need to get there. So I'd say that it's important to have a budget and track your spending because, if you don't know where your money's going, it's hard to achieve any sort of financial goal. I mean, owning a house in a city like Toronto and Vancouver, if you're a single homeowner, today is pretty tough. Maybe you should go for a condo first because, quite honestly, if I tried to duplicate what I did in the year 2015, I don't think that I could do it. I mean, my house is worth like a crazy amount, like $600,000 now. I don't think I could have done the same thing that I did before, and it really speaks to the broader issue of housing affordability. And with the new rules that they brought in for down payments, like 5% down and then 10% over the $500,000, they seem to keep making it tougher for first-time home buyers and millennials. So I don't know. I'd like to see the government step in and make it a bit easier for people to get into the housing market because it just seems to keep getting harder.
I mean, I think part of that is because I know, in the United States, we had our whole issue where it got a little too easy to get into the market, and it burned our whole country basically, didn't it?
Yes.
So I guess having a few rules in place before you make giant loans and buy a place might make some sense, but I guess we have to find a happy medium between that.
Exactly.
So no, I thought that's interesting that you talk about how the new rules kind of make it difficult for first-time homebuyers and millennials to get in, especially in Toronto and Vancouver, because as we know, I mean, a detached home in Vancouver or Toronto is going to be more than $1 million. And even when you're looking at condos, we're looking, I think the average was 600,000 about for Toronto. And I thought that was interesting that you said that, because I think part of it is they wanted to slow down those housing markets. But a lot of the time we get that conventional advice that you're supposed to save up 20%. And so if 10% is too much for somebody to save up for a down payment, I mean, I can't imagine trying to save up 20% if you like follow conventional advice. I don't, obviously, but if you following conventional advice and trying to save up 20% in those markets, it's even crazier.
Exactly. I mean, you can't even get mortgage insurance or a house valued over $1 million.
Right.
So you've got to come up with a 20% down payment. So, I mean, that's pretty tough. That like on $1 million property, that's $200,000 that you have to come up with. That's a lot of money. So
that's a whole house in other markets.
Exactly.
Right.
Well,
Well,
my market.
I was going to say, yeah, in the market I'm living in, you can get the house I'm living in I could probably, if I wanted to buy it instead of rent it, I could probably buy it for about $100,000.
Must be rough.
Yeah. It's a hard life here in Idaho,
Down payment for it.
which is why I'm here, right? Because it's inexpensive. Because I can live here in Idaho and it's really inexpensive, and I can do what I want with my money.
I feel like that's actually the state motto, isn't it? Live here. It's inexpensive.
It's inexpensive. You can't go anywhere, and it takes you 3 hours to get to an airport, but it's inexpensive.
If there's anything that I think maybe most people, maybe reword this. When I was that age, the thing for me was not necessarily that I would have to work hard to do that, but just what I even wanted to do at that age. Like how do you get, I think maybe a lot of people are like, well, what am I going to do in my early mid-20s that I even know that I want to own a home and do this thing? So it's kind of a unique thing in its own. Like what told you that that's what you wanted to do? How did you know that was the direction you should go?
Well, I definitely have to credit my parents for setting a good example, because they were homeowners themselves. So I probably wouldn't have been so determined to own a home if it wasn't for them setting a good example. And I strongly believe that owning a home is the foundation of financial success. I like how it basically is a forced savings, because I mean you can be better off renting, but the problem is that you have to be financially disciplined and willing to save the money that you're saving from rent, and that would have gone towards like household expenses if you would have had a mortgage. But the problem is people just let that go to lifestyle inflation and take nicer vacations or buy a fancier car with that. So basically I credit my parents with encouraging me to buy a home, because if they were renters, then I probably wouldn't have the same outlook that I do today.
My son's so screwed. No, I'm kidding.
I'd say what you did. It doesn't sound, like I said, it doesn't sound like it's that crazy a story. It's just that it takes a lot of determination, a lot of hard work, and I think that's maybe where a lot of people are a little afraid to jump in, and maybe that's the reaction that you're getting, at least in some people's psyches.
I think what he said that was really on the mark was discipline. Because, like I said, I'm a renter. I've done both the home ownership thing, which I hate, and the renting thing, which I love, and I love apartments. But I think like the discipline and the figuring out what you want and being disciplined enough to make it happen is what's really important.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, if you're not determined and you're not willing to make any sort of financial sacrifices, and your current lifestyle, you're not saving any money, you're living paycheck to paycheck, then none of your long-term financial goals are going to come true. So you really need a reality check, and you need to take a look at yourself in the mirror and say, am I willing to give up those lattes and cut back on some of my expenses? Because if you're not saving any money. Either you need to increase your income or decrease your expenses, or both. So, there's no easy way about it. You have to be willing to work hard. If you're not willing to do that, then, your financial goals just aren't going to come true.
Sean, I really love this story, and I love that what you're doing is really within reach of most people. You just have to put the hard work into it. What we like to do now is have our final word for the episode. So our final word on financial independence. Tom, if you could give us yours.
There's certainly certain sacrifices Sean made that I probably couldn't do, like having roommates and everything. But I think certainly everybody can take something from that, like just the idea to work hard for what you want and don't just kind of do nothing and expect everything to kind of work out.
And Peter, what's your final word?
My final word is just to take from that setting those goals is important. Figuring out what you want out of life, whether it is home ownership or whether there are other goals that you have of retiring early or whatever the case may be. Figure out what those goals are. Sit down, have a budget. Get rid of all your debt first of all, and then start saving so you can make those goals come true. It's not going to happen unless you start that planning process first.
Miranda, what's your final word?
Kind of along the line of Peter, I think you want to take a look at what sort of lifestyle you want to lead and what kind of flexibility and freedom is important to you, and then try and take the steps that will help you achieve that. Like I said earlier, I'm not terribly interested in amassing a huge amount of money. Obviously, I am saving for the future. I've got my tax advantage retirement accounts that I contribute to, but what I'm really most interested in is being able to live flexibly now and be as financially stable as possible. And so just sort of, evaluate that and figure out what matters to you.
And Kyle, what's your final word on financial independence?
Well, I don't know about everyone's plan for financial independence, but I think a solid start would be to check out the singles site or the singles ad of a young Sean Cooper who is on the market, not the stock market, the singles market. So cue that romantic music in your head. If you want a level-headed guy who enjoys long bike rides, Sean is your man.
Wow, Kyle, I think you have like your own kind
Sorry
of
if I embarrassed you, Sean. I just loved the post. I just loved it. I think it's awesome. All the best of luck to you.
So Kyle, when you're going to do my singles ad?
Never own a home, Miranda Marquardt.
We're going off a little bit on a tangent there, I think. But Sean, what's your final word on financial independence?
I would say whether it's financial independence or whatever financial goal you'd like to meet, it all comes down to goal setting. Whatever goal you'd like to meet in your life, basically it's about setting a goal and basically creating a game plan in order for that to happen. So, I mean, owning a home is definitely a big goal, a long-term goal, but you have to be willing to make sacrifices as well as basically look at creating steps in order to own a home. So, look at where you are right now, look at your budget, and see places that you can perhaps cut back and try to bank as much money as possible. And if it seems like a realistic goal for you and you're willing to put in the effort and work hard, then you can possibly own a home. And even if you can't pay it off in 3 years, then you can pay it off at whatever seems realistic for yourself.
Sean, thank you for sharing your ideas of financial independence as well as your own personal story. It's very inspiring, and hopefully our viewers and listeners out there can take something away from that. Hopefully they do. I think they definitely can. Tell us a little bit about where people can find you and what you do.
Okay, well, I'm a personal finance writer. You can find my work on my website, SeanCooperWriter.com. I also write for RateSupermarket.ca, and if you want to check out my latest writing, you can follow me on Twitter as well as like me on Facebook. Those are found on my website. So yes, definitely check that out.
And why don't you shout those out for us, just in case somebody wants to hop on there right now.
Okay, my Twitter account is at Sean Cooper Wright, and Facebook. You can basically click on the main link on my website. That's the easiest way to get to it, and like me on Facebook, and you can check out the latest articles, as well as I share content related to personal finance on there as well on from websites like Yahoo Finance.
Thanks again, Sean, for coming on and sharing your story with us. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. And until next week, be good with your money. Good night.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Mastermind Show. Get more information at moneymastermindshow.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Google+.